So one of the things that I think the church for a long time, again, culturally, I think a lot of things have changed, and they've changed their tune on a lot of things the last 15 years, like you mentioned. But one of the main messages that I heard growing up was, this is the box. It contains the fullness of truth, and there's nothing outside the box to be discovered. Like, stay in the box, stay in the pews is
Sure.
how some would say it.
Okay.
So it's like the idea of faith transitions and nuance to belief, right? Which I've had some of that in my adult life. Do you think there's spiritual value in doubt and in questioning the beliefs that we've been told our whole lives are true and that shouldn't be questioned?
Parse that a little. Doubt, no. Questioning, yes. So I don't know that a doubting heart or a doubting mind it's beneficial. But I do believe that questioning is amazing. I think that you should ask questions about everything and be as informed as possible so that your, faith foundation is as robust as it can be. As far as this is all the truth, maybe you just weren't listening. I'm pretty sure one of the articles of faith is that we believe all that God has revealed, that he does now reveal, and that he will yet reveal many great and important things pertaining to the kingdom of God. So, I believe that we are a revelatory church. I mean, even just in the last few years with President Nelson, it has felt fairly revelatory to me.
Yeah.
There have been changes to procedure and other things along those lines. Doctrinally, we're super consistent, but procedurally, not so much,
Yeah, and I think that there's new things that can be brought into the box by certain people of authority, like prophets and apostles.
Yeah.
But anything outside of what's already there or what's going to be brought in, I think there's still a lot of people that I was this for a long time.
Yeah.
I'm not going to seek to understand the deep nuances and history of the church because I don't want to know.
Okay.
I would rather not know these things and sort of blindly stay in the box.
Okay.
Versus go out on an exploration of reading and study and, to ask some of these harder questions.
I would say before my mission, I was similar. But when I made a decision that I was going to go teach that this was true, I needed to know. And that's where the shift took place for me, was really in that transition of going from like believer of the faith to teacher of the faith. I had to know if I was going to go tell other people that I knew. And so there became this change in me. And so those habits of study on the mission carried forward with me until, now. And that's really what I would attribute, my understanding to, is just a constant desire to study and learn. And now it's become almost insatiable for me. My wife criticizes me because I won't watch TV shows with her or whatever else. I'd rather just go study. There's a lot of times at night, she'll go in and want to watch a show, and I'll just come out back and sit by the fire and read for 3.5 hours and take notes and, put arguments together. But I really find enjoyment in it, to the point that I have to be conscious of isolating myself from my wife, and her feeling like, oh, you care more about learning the mysteries of God than you do about me. Where I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I need to tone it down a little. Let me come watch a show and let's hang out and bond, bond emotionally. And because I love her deeply, but I also love studying the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so for me, I could spend all my free time doing that, literally all of it, and do almost nothing else.
If God revealed himself to you in a vision tonight and said, Luke, it's all not true, how would you react?
Did I have a chance to talk to him?
No.
That's just, he showed up, said that, and left. And said, what is not true? All of it's not true? Like he is not God? or like,
the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, as you've known it for your whole life, is not true.
and then didn't give me any further instruction.
Yeah, how would you handle that?
Well,
Speaking a hard one.
yeah, no, that's a hard question. I would definitely reassess my belief system. And then I would probably, through prayer, which I know God answers, reach out to him, try and receive personal revelation around what did that message mean. You know, one of the ways that I've been taught to identify a heavenly messenger is that when that messenger comes, they will give you further knowledge and light and knowledge or understanding of God's gospel. So if he just showed up and was like, it's not true, and left, and just like put doubt and didn't teach me anything further, I might question that was a divine experience. So, you know, I'm not sure I agree with the premise of the question. I don't know that premise is actually possible, because I also believe in some particular ways in which if one is going to meet God face to face, things will transpire. And, you know, scripturally, I don't know that holds true for me in the way in which you painted him showing up. So it's like, I would question a lot of things if he just showed up and was like, hey, it's all false, and then poof, he was gone.
Let's say you stayed.
Okay.
And you could ask him some questions and spend 5 or 10 minutes with him really trying to understand. How would that conversation look?
Well, one of the things I've always wanted is called the grand vision. So this has happened to a lot of ancient prophets, where they see from the beginning to the end. So if I could, you know, if God would indulge me in that, that would be my first ask probably, is I would love to see the grand vision. I would love to know from the beginning to the end, because then I wouldn't even have to have a conversation.
Yeah.
It'd be done.
Yeah.
I would know how it started and where it was going and what the purpose was and how everything shaped.
And why you showed up that night.
Yeah, all of it, right? So like that would be my first. If he was like, it's premature for the grand vision, you can ask me 5 questions, right? Then I would probably ask, first off, a question about religion and its prescriptions, and if it's, you know, what he wants, then how am I to go about worshiping thee? That's what I would probably ask first. In an ideal scenario, how am I to go about worshiping thee? And then he would have to lay that out, you know, through prayer, through scripture study. These are, you know, if it was through church or ordinance or covenant or whatever, then I would know, you know, more fully how that was to be. Second question I would probably ask is, what's the best way for me to move my family and friends to salvation? Because I care. Deeply about all of them. My family and my friends. So I would want to know, what's the best way for me to help them to receive all that you have to give them?
Have you asked him that before?
Yeah, a lot.
And
he's given me a lot of answers.
Yeah, what's the cliff notes?
I mean, it's specific for each individual. Is what's so amazing to me, is that it's my testimony that God knows every person individually. He knows what they're struggling with, and, you know, what they're going through, and what is best for them to move forward. So I have found that there's not a single prescription, that God is intimate in that way, you know, which I think is one of the most profound aspects of coming to know God, is to know that he knows you individually as a person, and that he's aware of who you are. You know, this great God of the cosmos that created all that we see and know, and is omniscient and omnipotent and all-knowing and loving, and it's like he knows who you are, which is incredible. He knows you like you know your children. I'm firmly convinced that when we step back through the veil into the presence of God, we will meet someone that we are intimately familiar with. who we love deeply and who loves us deeply and who we know, a face we recognize, a relationship we have built. I have felt that in prayer often, that God knows his children.
Not to be selfish, but what has he said about me as it pertains to
Tyler,
our relationship?
love is the overwhelming thing I get for you. So just be loving. To be kind in ways you can, to promote faith where you can, but just to be loving.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a...
That's why I tell you guys, I love you.
Yeah.
I say that often. I wonder sometimes if people see that as strange from me, because I do say I love you.
Some probably do. I certainly don't.
But yeah, I say that to people all the time. I love you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, like I felt that. I think there's, when I describe my journey, which I haven't done much, but I've done it to my wife, and I've shared it with you. And,
yeah.
You know, I think maybe the main catalyst, or one of the main catalysts, was just the way that you treated me, you know?
Yeah. I don't care much for judgment. It says in the scriptures, judge not, that ye be not judged, for the same judgment with which ye judge shall ye also be judged.
Yeah.
So I just try to love. I seek to understand before I try to be understood, and then, you know, try to treat them how they want to be treated.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's what Jesus would have done.
Yeah.
Same thing.
We need some tissues out here.
Yeah. You asked the questions. Got the waterworks flowing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would have been pretty easy for you to, you know, and some of my friends who are faithful members were this way, and it didn't land with me, right? Where it was overbearing, the overbearing of testimony, and you were a part of some of these discussions in a group setting where it was just, and you could feel
totally.
with me, like it's not landing, right? You
well,
know?
And like in our conversations, you know, I would say, I've learned this. If you want to know it, let me know.
Yeah.
That's why I ask people a lot of times, can I share something with you?
Yeah.
But I'm genuinely inquiring. Do you care to have it shared with you? And you're straightforward. You'll be like, yeah, listen, I'm not ready.
I wasn't ready for a while.
I don't care to know.
Yeah. Yeah. And there was a big one, and I actually texted you during the episode today that we need to do the City of Zion kind of.
That'd be a cool one. That'd be a cool one.
But, you know, there was certain information that you had, or light knowledge that you had received, and you were keen on sharing it, and I knew you were, but I wasn't in a position to receive it. And it probably took you like 6 months of just every month saying, hey, I'm still would like to share this.
If you want to know, let me know.
And then finally one night it clicked. And
well, because you would ask me questions and I'd say, well, that's relevant to this.
Yeah.
If you want to know it, you should understand that.
Yeah. And we happen to be in a church building, which I find not a coincidence. When
playing basketball,
but in a church building.
Sure.
When you said, are you ready to know? And I said yes. And, you know, I think that night, I'm not sure we've talked a lot about this, but that night had a profound impact on me that probably you don't realize. It was in the room right behind you.
Yeah.
And, you know, I very intentionally put on a mask coming in because I was ready to receive it as naturally and purely as God would have me receive it, but I wasn't willing to show you how I was receiving it.
Yeah.
I wanted to stay neutral. And, but there were some things that were said that I felt the Spirit. And I remember going home that night, it was 1 a.m. or something. And I'm not sure if it was that night or the next morning. My wife was like, you never go to bed that late. What was that all about? You know?
Yeah.
and I had shared some of those experiences with her. And I think
Cool.
that was really a big catalyst for me choosing to see the church from a different light than I had chosen to see it the previous years, you know? So thank you. Yeah. Yeah. I think the church, what do you think is the church's position on things like, there's a mental health crisis happening globally, like around the world, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's easy for people to denounce that it's real, but I believe that there's a lot of people really struggling with real problems. I have family members who really struggle, and they have to be on medication, and they have to do therapy, and they have to rest sometimes. When for me it's hard to understand that because I don't have those same complications, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that the church fully promotes that, you know, like the need to address real mental illness and mental health. But what's your position on just mental illness?
Well, I would say again that I think the church is divine here. So, you know, the new program that came out for the youth? Yeah, which is, I can't remember what is the exact name. Can you remember it off the top of your head? Emotional resilience.
Yeah. Yep.
It's an emotional resilience program. So I think the church is intimately aware that people are struggling. I mean, I've been in some positions where I can, you know, see what our church organization is doing for its members. And I've seen where we're paying for counseling checks, and, you know, we're sending checks to counseling departments for people, and we're doing things that are enabling them to be able to get help for issues that they're struggling with. A lot of those could, you know, depression, anxiety, whatever it may be. So the church is not, I don't think the church is unaware of that, because it tracks its funds very closely.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I just went through an audit not too long ago, and, you know, they're looking at every expense that comes out of our ward.
Wow.
So like, they're aware when you're sending X amount of dollars from your ward to therapists. They're aware when you're sending, you know, checks for different things. And so I think that this initiative of emotional resilience is divine. We also recently came out with the addiction recovery program. I think that speaks to where society's at currently, right? Some of that addiction, I think probably the largest addiction would be pornography. You know, behind that, you're probably looking at screens, like screen time addiction, video games, phones, social media, stuff like that. And then you're talking substance abuse. So it's like when substance abuse is starting to fall down the chain of like what most people are struggling and addicted to, it's like, yeah, there's definitely some change that's taking place in society at large. I mean, I think that this will probably be the death of most of us. You know, just social media, screen time in general. We're more connected than we've ever been, but more lonely. We have less problems than we've ever faced, but more anxious. You know, just on and on and on. That these problems that people are facing with, we have more to be happy about, but are more depressed. And so I think we are fighting battles that are mental, because we have no physical battles we have to fight anymore. You're not having to forage for food. You're not fighting to defend your territory. You're not, you know, struggling because you don't have religious rights or, you know, social rights. It's like there's very few things that you actually have to fight. And what we're dealing with now is this connectivity to all of this information and, you know, the breakdown of social fabric as we know it. And that's causing a lot of problems for a lot of people. So I think that God's aware of that. At least in our church, he is. And, you know, to come out with these initiatives, these are not like, hey, drop that initiative today. They've been thinking about that for a year or two, to put that curriculum together and to roll it out church-wide, and to, you know, they do focus groups before, and they do research studies, and they test it out in different places. And, you know, the church doesn't act real fast, unless it's disaster relief or one of the fastest acting. But, you know, I think that is divinely inspired.
Yeah.
You know, I saw the home-centered church supported 2 years before COVID is brilliant.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
Yeah.
couldn't have timed it better, you know? It was the same thing with like the get out of debt, keep your food storage and savings, and then '08, you know, like I have a profound testimony of prophets and their ability to speak as seers.
Yeah. What role do you think bishops should play or maybe not play in counseling members that have mental health issues?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be a fine line. I think that bishops operate primarily by the Spirit. You know, I serve right now in a bishopric with a bishop. I'm a clerk, but I'm in all the meetings and I have access to all the back end tools. And so I'm with bishop all the time. And, you know, the thing I've been most impressed about with my current bishop is his attunement to the Spirit. He just listens and he's very loving, but he gets deep impressions about what he should or shouldn't say or do. And so, you know, for me, it would be follow the Spirit. I don't know that there is a hard and fast rule. We have a handbook of instruction that outlines, you know, the set rules of what you can and can't do. But within inside that, you know, rule framework, I think that it's pretty free. And I think that, you know, the guidance from the church is to act according to the Spirit.
This last section is about cultural pressure for missions, marriage, and family. Do you think that the current mission age policy is helping or hurting spiritual maturity?
I think it helps. I think one of the difficult times for me was graduate from high school, sit in limbo until I could serve.
Yeah.
To be able to get out of school and go serve, I think is brilliant.
Yeah.
I don't know that you're any more mature at 19 than you are at 18.
Yeah. Not
much of a difference there. So I see that as divinely inspired. Missions in general, I think they're brilliant. I have a brother that's an older brother that's not a member of the church. He seeks for something similar for his children. His two oldest have now joined the army. Same thing. Baptism by fire. Grow up now.
Yeah.
Learn responsibility. Become an adult. You know, the mission is the same thing, but with the overtone of learning to worship God and gaining a testimony. So I see it as brilliant in that way. I think that's why the church asks that every able young man should serve. I think it's a valiant request. You know, I saw nothing but good come out of my mission for me. It made me a lot of who I am today. And I'm grateful for who I am. I'm thankful for the habits that I had, for the relationships I developed, for the testimony I built. I mean, it was just an incredible experience. Not easy. It's difficult. But I think all good things are hard. It's either the pain of growth or the pain of regret.
Is the mission more for the missionary or the people that they serve?
I know I got way more than I gave anybody else. That's for sure.
Like, do you think by design it's that way?
I think the gospel of Jesus Christ is that way. You can never repay God. So when you're called to serve and you go serve for him, you always come out of that experience more enriched than, you know, you don't come out of it feeling like, oh yeah, that was all for God. I gave it all to him and I got nothing in return. I always come feeling out like, gosh, I'm even more in debt than I was before I went because I feel so blessed for the experience. Yeah. So I think that that's built into the gospel of Jesus Christ, that when you behave the way you're supposed to, God blesses you as abundantly as he is able.
Yeah, I remember the number of times that non-member friends after my mission would be like, dude, like you just gave away 2 years of your life. Do you feel like you're like behind? I'm like, what did you do from 19 to 21?
Yeah. Partied,
you know.
Yeah, just wasted freaking time.
Whatever. Yeah. And I'm like, dude, I feel like I literally advanced 10 years in that short amount of time.
I remember talking to somebody, business owner, non-member, but he didn't know I was LDS, and he was making a comment about hiring people. And he was basically just said, we need to find more of those Mormon missionaries. Those boys are brilliant.
Yeah.
You know, it's like that you build something that causes you to just be, you know, a good person, a person of action, a person of diligence, a person of honest, a person of hard work, a person of, you know, resolve. It's just on and on and on and on. There's so many great lessons to be learned. by just, being put into the refiner's fire for 2 years.
Well, for those who don't understand, I mean, a day in the life of a missionary looks something like this. You wake up at early, 6 or 6:30 a.m. The very first thing that you do, that you're asked to do, is to exercise.
Yep.
The very first thing, get out of bed, do some push-ups, go on a walk, go on a run. The very next thing you're supposed to do after you shower is to study.
Yep.
1 hour by yourself and 1 hour with your companion. 2 hours a day before you do anything. You've worked out and you've studied.
That's such a brilliant framework already.
And we're only at 9 o'clock.
I know, but if you can learn to rise early, work out, and put good things in your mind, you almost win life.
You're at 9 o'clock. And then basically from 9 until the sun goes down.
You got lunch, but yeah.
You've got lunch in between, but lunch is
45 minutes.
Just lunch, as fast as you can.
Yeah.
It's out on the street, prospecting, meaning going out talking to strangers about the Savior. You're taking meetings that you had scheduled with people investigating the church, or maybe less active members or active members of the church. You're doing service like multiple times a week. You're going to dinner. You're spiritually edifying the family that's feeding you dinner, if you're lucky enough to have members that feed you. You're coming home. You're essentially, was there a nighttime study, or just kind of wind down?
Usually 9 to 10 at night, you were filling out your report for the day.
There you go.
So cataloging what everything happened, getting your calendar set for the next day. So like companionship debriefing.
Yeah. And then companionship prayer every night, and then go to sleep and do it all over again 700 days in a row.
Yeah. Beast mode.
Without missing a day.
Yep. There are no days off. There's no fly home to see your family.
Which, by the way, when we served without talking to a family or friend, basically
cell phones weren't this wasn't even a thing when I served in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, if that's not boot camp, I don't know what it is.
It's legit. Jesus boot camp.
Yeah.
Amazing though.
Amazing.
It creates some awesome qualities. So mission, I'm all for. I think it's brilliant. I wouldn't change it.
Yeah. How does the pressure of getting married young shape self-worth?
Ooh, can I make one comment though before we move on?
Sure.
An aspect of church culture I loathe. Judgment of those who don't serve or come home early. I think you just have to be so tender to people that are so hard on themselves. There is just no room for judgment of somebody who either doesn't serve a mission or comes home early for any reason.
Yeah.
My heart goes out to those individuals. So many of them end up leaving the church or going inactive because of the just judgmental culture of the church.
Yeah.
And that just weighs heavy on my heart. I hate that aspect of the church at times.
Yeah.
That it can be judgmental in that way, So I don't know. That just is on my mind.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, my brother had really bad migraines all growing up. And they gave him some medication to have for the 2 years while he was out there. And they took control of him about 6 or 8 months into his mission in Portugal. And he was sent home early, and the way that he was treated by the members was just sick to me. It almost shook my faith so much that I didn't serve a mission.
Yeah.
And my brother's never been the same. He left the church shortly after. He's never come back.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it is what had to do with the cultural judgment of what you're talking about.
Yeah, I feel the same. I wish we could just emulate Christ more in that aspect.
Yeah. What are the other areas that you find members are quick to judge against?
Facial hair. That's why I wear this.
You feel that?
Yes.
Really?
Oh yeah. All the time.
Interesting.
When I don't know, have I ever told you about when I first grew my beard?
I don't know. I don't think so.
I had a friend that talked to me about it and was like, why can't LDS people grow beards? I'm like, we can grow beards. He's like, well, none of your leadership has beards. And like I've met your bishops and different stuff, like he was using terminology for the church. And he's like, and none of them have beards. I was like, why don't we do facial hair in the church? Well, inquisitive mind, I just start digging, right? I find out that it goes back to like the early hippie movement. Oakes made a talk at BYU, avoid the appearance of evil. And he talked about being clean shaven versus like the scraggly hippies that were growing their hair out long and their beards and all that stuff. He uses an analogy of putting a water bottle in a brown paper bag, walking down the street and drinking from your water bottle in a brown paper bag. Like back in the day, a brown paper bag was on the alcohol when you purchased it, right? Yeah. So his analogy was like, if you look the part, you're judged the part. So don't look the part, you know? Which I think a lot of church culture, the rigidity of like how we look and how we dress and all those things stemmed out of that movement of trying to separate oneself from these, you know, the hippie movement, drugs and sexual promiscuity and all that kind of stuff. Well, it just kind of grabbed a hold of the church and, you know, made some serious problems, I think.
Yeah.
You know, because like I invite a lot of my friends to church. And I have people that come to church with me fairly often. And like, you know, I had a friend of mine, Zach, who I love deeply, showed up to church with me one week and sat down and said, man, I'm glad I didn't wear jeans. But he came in like, you know, kind of like some khaki slacks and a polo. But like, you know, what's the standard dress of an LDS
I mean, talk
person.
About judgment. I don't wear the standard drip.
Yeah.
And I know every week I stand out.
But you can feel that judgment
for sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because you're not wearing a white shirt and a tie and a blue suit.
Yeah.
Whatever. Yeah. If I were to paint like the picture perfect Mormon, it's clean shaven, part in your hair, a blue suit, a white shirt, maybe a red and blue striped tie, you know, brown belt, brown shoes.
Nice shoes. Yep.
Yep. Like that's who we are. But to me, that screams the Pharisees.
Same.
Yeah. So I grew this for that reason.
Yeah.
I literally did all this research. I mean, like, I should show you. I mean, you'll get a kick out of this.
And you wear jeans to church too.
I do. I wear jeans to church.
Which I don't even do that. I mean, that's next level.
I'm next level.
I wear joggers. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Like, this is my research on beards. You guys can't see what I'm doing here, but I'm scrolling through just pages and pages and pages of research. This is one of my favorite quotes of all time. This is by Hugh Nibley. The worst sinners, according to Jesus, are not the harlots and publicans, but the religious leaders with their insistence on proper dress and grooming, their careful observance of all the rules, their precious concern for status symbols, their strict legality, their pious patriotism. The haircut becomes the test of virtue in a world where Satan deceives and rules by appearances.
Can you send that to me?
Isn't that brilliant?
I am dropping that bomb this Sunday in Elders Quorum, guaranteed.
It's a brilliant quote.
Because I still like, dude, the weeks that I go to Elders Quorum, which is the second hour of our church service.
Yep.
Every other week.
Second and fourth.
Yeah. The second and fourth Sundays every week. I personally cannot stand being in Elders Quorum because of what you're talking about. And the judgment that I face every time I walk in there.
Sure.
And what feels like insincere outreach to rescue me because I am not wearing the same clothes.
Sure.
And because I don't look the same.
Yeah.
And when I speak my truth. I speak the truth, I believe, not what everybody else wants me to say.
Sure.
Right. And so I think that's, the biggest cultural thing for me that I wish would change is the acceptance of all and the judgment piece.
Well, this is an interesting dynamic in the church. The church is definitely moving towards unity, but some people mistake unity for acceptance of sin, right?
Yeah.
So like, the LGBTQ topic or some of those other things where it's like, oh, the church is eventually going to accept these things. It's like, it's not. It's moving towards unity because it has to. This stagnant, judgmental culture of the past is not going to work in a global church. It just won't. You won't convert the world in that way. And so you can feel that. You can feel this softening, like Nelson saying things like, I can't remember in his last talk or the talk before, he said something about like harsh words being like hurting people. And like, there's part of me that's like, come on, microaggressions with words.
Yeah.
But there's also part of me that's like, you know what? We are in a culture where people are sensitive to that. And unless we can learn to be sensitive to that, we're going to come off as arrogant and judgmental and unkind. And so it's like, there's part of me that I've had to rethink this toughness mentality of like, if you can't handle somebody speaking words at you, okay, go sit in your safe space.
Yeah.
But it's like, this is really affecting people.
Yeah.
There are kids that are struggling mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually because of things that people are saying to them.
Yeah.
Bullying is a real problem. There are kids that are taking their lives. You start to realize like, okay, maybe my perspective on mental toughness is harsher than it needs to be.
Yeah.
And I need to create some space in myself for those that maybe are not as mentally tough.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. In my I am statement, I say I'm an acceptor of people. My ability to judge does not exist. It's non-existent.
That's a great one.
A lot of this stems from my parents, specifically my mother, which ironically, very judgmental towards her children.
Yeah.
But anyone who's not her children, like the most accepting person ever, which stems from her mother, Dixia Wells Longshore, who's just the sweetest woman ever and passed away when I was young. And she always tells a story about her mother where she went to visit her mother in a care home late in her mother's life, like within years of her passing. And she walks into her mother's room at this care home, and there's a guy standing in there, and he has a purple mohawk that's 12 inches tall, and he's tattooed from face all the way down to his body. And my mom walked in and had a visceral reaction, like, what is this guy doing to my mother? And she said, hi, I'm Jill. I'm her daughter. Like, who are you? And her mom just lit up and said, this is Jake so-and-so. He's the best. He comes and visits me. His mom is just 2 doors down, and he's just the kindest soul. And like, she just loved this guy that on the outside was so scary looking. Yeah. And, I think that's really been passed down in our family in a pretty meaningful way. And so I think the judgment in the church is something that I really wish could change.
Yeah. But there's part of me too that says, but there is a fine line, right? Like, how far can you go down that, what is appropriate to worship God wearing? Yeah. Right. Sandals and a bathing suit with a tank top. Like, I guess if that's what you want to do, but it's like, there's a level of respect, that I think some of it is important. Our demographic now does not care, right? Zuckerberg was one of the first, like, I'm just going to wear a hoodie. Yeah. It's like, that forget you type of clothing. Yeah. Where it's like, I got $1 billion come at me. I'm not wearing a suit and tie. Yeah. Like, I don't care. Yeah. Which is funny because he's kind of gone full circle now, and he like dresses up when he speaks in public and stuff. But, I think there is kind of a fine line there, and you just, got to be aware of that. But the Pharisee culture, I won't have it.
What are some of the other ones that you see often?
That are judgmental or Pharisaic in nature?
Yeah, both.
What else do I see in the church that operates that way? I think dress and grooming is one of the largest. Here's another one. And this is a great one.
I have one too that I personally experience a lot.
For me, positions of leadership. That somehow causes somebody to be more righteous. Your progression in the gospel of Jesus Christ has nothing to do with the position that you hold in its church. Nothing. Joseph Smith said there is nothing that God has revealed to Joseph that he will not reveal to the weakest of saints, right? If they're able, to the most humble of saints. And so, the ability to meet God face to face, which is what happened to Joseph Smith, is available to the least of us, regardless of position or title or anything. Personal salvation has nothing to do with the title that you hold.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's another one that's Pharisaical in nature. Like, oh, you're a stake president. Oh, you're a 70. Oh, you're a bishop. Oh, you're a whatever. I don't think that that should be seen as, some form of righteousness.
Well, not only should it not be seen as that, I think the way that many of these men in positions of power act and behave is as if they deserve to be treated differently.
Totally.
Right? Yeah.
Totally.
That one drives me nuts too.
Yeah.
So
that's one that comes to mind for me.
I have a tattoo.
Mm-hmm.
Tattoos are like very frowned upon.
Leviticus.
I mean, yeah, you could argue it's biblical. But like, I actually really like tattoos.
Yeah.
I think they're great. And
Sure.
I think that you can be a worthy temple recommending holder in the church and have a tattoo.
I think you can.
And
I see a lot of people in the temple that have tattoos.
Yeah.
So if that weren't the case, they wouldn't be there.
But it's just funny when people discover it, because it's a little bit hidden in my arm, but when people discover it, sometimes I'll wear like short sleeve kind of polo looking. It's always funny the looks
the look you get.
So
I find that fascinating. There's part of me that just does it to be contrarian to culture.
Yeah.
Beard and jeans.
Yeah.
But it's like, if you meet me, I didn't finish telling you, but when I studied all the beard stuff, I just wanted to get a confirmation from God. So I prayed, and this is what I heard. You can wear a beard and be a spiritual giant in my church. That's exactly what it said to me. And I will never forget that phrase, because that's what it said to me.
Yeah.
And so I was like, yeah, God is no respecter of persons, man. He doesn't freaking care. Christ had a beard, long hair, and I don't think he wore the nicest clothes.
Yeah.
Because he was not, gainfully employed, I don't think.
Yeah.
He was a carpenter.
Yeah.
So.
Well, this was a fun one. I've got about 50 others that we'll do at some point. And there was a couple of things that came out of today that I think will be clear cases that we'll want to make and debates that we'll want to have moving forward. So
you were too easy.
Well, there's more where that came from. But I do think that the topics that we talked about today, albeit not difficult to address, I think are really...
Some are if you don't understand, but if you have an understanding, my experience has been, Occam's razor. You familiar with this principle?
Yeah.
That the simplest answer is the right one.
Yeah.
It's like, usually when you get down to the truth of anything, it's pretty simple. It's pretty brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
All right, man.
That's a wrap. Good stuff.
Yeah, that was fun.